let's begin. We're on the Mishnah on Samachayim Bez. B'shiva drochim boitkenes hazav. So we gave an introduction to this about this yesterday. The difference between a zav and a zava. A zav is a male tumah, a zava is a female tumah. But I would say the bigger difference is that a zava is something that we recognize today. It's the same thing as a numa. It's menstruation. It's dam. It's blood. Zav is something that looks like semen, but it's not the same thing. It does look. It's visually different, and said it's something that we don't recognize today. Now, one of the other differences is that a woman becomes tamei even if she sees the blood by accident, so to speak. So she went in for a procedure, and they caused her to menstruate. That would potentially be an example of an inus. It wasn't the regular cycle, but if it's menstrual blood, then she would become tamei. Whereas by zav, if there was a cause, an explanation for a man to see a zav emission, then he does not become tamei. The Gemara says there are 7 different excuses why a person might become a zav. Shiva drachim boitkenes hazav. The Mishnah, and they are before he became a zav, before he became tamei as a zav. And they are b'maichel with food is 1, b'mishta number 2 is drinks, b'masa is because he carried a heavy package is 3, b'kfitza he jumped is 4, b'choli he's ill is 5, ub'mara is he saw something that was that made him very afraid. He saw a demon, or maybe he saw a battle or something. That would be number 6. Ubehir is something in a rousing thought. And Taisus explains it as he witnessed the cohabitation of somebody else, of another couple, and that caused him to see a tumas zav. Misha nizkak laziva. Once he sees tumas ziva, so then ein bait can I say, once he becomes a zav, then a zav emission continues his tumah. It extends his tumah even if there seems to be a reason why he saw this zav. We'll explain why in a moment. Somebody hits his friend, and it seems like he hit his friend hard enough that he's going to die from the illness, right? So this is I don't know what the analog in secular law is, but if you strike somebody with sufficient force to kill them in a week or 2 weeks, okay, so what happened? And it seemed like he was going to die in 2 weeks. Then vehikal mimenu mimashahaya. Then he has a surprising recovery. And it seemed like he was actually going to make it. He was going to remain alive. But then what happened? But then the illness got more severe, and he died. So does this act qualify for capital punishment? Is the question. Okay, so chayev, he's chayev, he's liable for penalty, capital punishment. We dispense with his head. Nechemia says, Potter, he's exempt. Because the fact that he got better seems to indicate that maybe things weren't as bad as they seemed. And the fact that he got worse after that, it's probably a separate event. Something else happened, and therefore it doesn't qualify. The man who struck him does not qualify. It isn't qualified for the death penalty because it doesn't seem as if his blow was strong enough to kill him. Okay. Like we said there's a difference by zav. If you're tamei and you see a tumah zav, your tumah is extended. Zav typically has to wait 7 days, but if he sees another emission, then he has to continue another 7 days. And that emission, there is no difference between einus and ratzon, whether there's another cause for this zav or not. What's the source that there's a difference? Once you become a zav, that you don't have the excuse of any of these. So we saw 7 excuses. If there are these 7 reasons could cause a person to see Tuma Ziva. But once he becomes a Zav, we don't let him, argue his excuses. We know immediately what's the source of this. Amar Dasan Amar Kral, or Dasan says the pasuk indicates V'hazav es zayvai l'riya shlishis iskish l'nekeva. So you have 3 words here. V'hazav es zayvai lazachar ulanekeva is the next word. So in other words, when a man is considered to be in the category of zav es zayvai, we'll explain that in a moment. Then he is l'zachar ulanekeva. There's no difference between a zachar and a nekeva. Says Rav Nosson l'riya shlishis, the third emission, iskish l'nekeva is compared to a nekeva, and like we said, a woman does not have any of these excuses. If a woman becomes a zava, it doesn't make a difference if there's another reason why it happened. It wasn't normal. She's still Tomei Zav. So to a man, after once he's already established as a zav, and the understanding here is as follows: that the Torah says v'hazav es zayvai, meaning the zav is the first time he saw, es zayvai is the second time he saw. So the first and the second time, which is before he becomes an actual zav, we let him give it these excuses, 7 excuses. But once he sees the third time, then it's l'zachar l'nekeva. Zachar is equal to nekeva, and they're both 3 times. Rabbi Eliezer says, I'm sorry, they're both tamei. In other words, the third re'iyas zav is like a nekeva. It's like a woman seeing Tuma Zava, in which case they are both tamei regardless of whether there's an excuse, both man and woman. Okay, the Gemara adds Vatanya Rabbi Eliezer b'shlishis b'ayit k'naisei b'raviyas ein b'ayit k'naisei. Rabbi Eliezer gives him a 3rd time, so he says even once he becomes tamei, it's only the 4th riyah that we say ein b'ayit k'naisei. We don't check if there was another reason. Okay, so evidently he understands the pasuk to have 3 and then l'zachar l'nekeva. What's the 3rd one? So the Gemara says, they're disagreeing with the word S. So the word S is used to combine v'hazav es zayvai, a man who has the S connects the 2 words. Rabbi Eliezer Darsh Etzim. Rabbi Eliezer says the S is another re'iyah ziva. Right, so we have 3 zivas, zav es zayvai. And then finally, after that, we say l'zachar l'nekeva. A zachar and a nekeva are the same. A man and a woman are the same. But according to the Rabbanan, leidar she'etzen, they don't provide they don't feel the word S is extra to tell me that it's an extra riyah, and therefore it's only 2 riyahs, two emissions of zav, and then there is l'zachar and l'nekeva. A zachar equals a nekeva.
What's the point of being examined? We don't know which of the 2 kinds of.
So we know we're talking here about an emission of zav, not an emission of semen.
Oh, okay.
We will discuss semen in a moment.
Okay.
Sheikh Vazar, what's
So,
different?
Rabbi, are you suggesting this is a sin of emission?
Yeah.
Should have known that would be coming.
So we're talking here about its own category of tumas zav, of a zav like emission. Okay. Okay. Mishaniskek l'ziva. Once a person becomes a zav, then ein bait kines, you don't check him. Ein say is fake shich v'zaret me'am. If there's an einus, meaning he's already a zav, and now he sees another zav emission as an einus, meaning it's not his fault. There's some other cause to it. It's not just a regular emission. So therefore, in that scenario, we say he's still tamei. Sveika, if we have a doubt whether or not he had an emission of zav, we say he's tamei. And shechvazaroi, his semen is also tamei. We'll explain that. We're not talking about a scenario where we're not sure if he had an emission, right? So let's say he found the stain next to him when he underneath him when he woke up. That would be maybe it's an old stain, maybe it's a new stain, and maybe he saw zav, maybe not. That is not what we're talking about. That's not a suffix. We're talking about elavade chazer, or certainly that he had an emission. The question only is, what category is it in? Suffix machmas shechva zera, suffix machmas re'iyah. We're not sure if it's a zav emission or it's a shechva zera emission, a seminal emission.
Rabbi?
Yes.
Did they run an emissions test?
Kiven sheniskak l'tuma sveka tomei.
See, when you do this precious bodily fluid stuff, I'm gonna make you pay for it.
Kiven sheniskak l'tuma sveka tomei.
Where would you be if it wasn't bodily fluid?
Well, sleeping a little better.
Kiven sheniskak l'tuma sveka tomei. However, once person's tamei zav, so even if we're not sure what type of emission, we presume it's the type that would continue to classify him as a zav. Okay, next Gemara. Shichvas Zari Tmeya. His seminal emissions are also tamei. Lamai. What are we talking about? Ilema lamas lamaga. If we're talking about with regard to touching, migarim shichvas Zari Tar. Is it different than the seminal emission of any person who's tar? Now, in general, a person who has a seminal emission becomes tamei over sort of an overnight tumah. This is why some men go to the mikveh every day, because there's sort of two categories of men who go to the mikveh every day. Some of them only go when they're with their wives, and they call that tfilas Ezra, and other ones go every day. And the reason is because sort of every day there's a doubt whether or not they may have been enriched. But by the way, this is not a Hasidic custom at all. This is sort of universal. The Gaon, who was the head of the Lithuanian, is not misnagdus fashion, also went to the mikveh every day. But that is why, because there's a certain tumah that's created by shechva zera. Why? It's a separate discussion. So that tumah is tamei b'maga. It's tamei with touch. However, it has to be moist. Once it dries, it's not tumah anymore. Okay. Elazar shalzov mitame b'masa. So Gemara says, Shechva Zera Zav, in addition to touch, also has masa, meaning if you carried it, you also become tamei. Man shamet le'lahad Amar Shechva Zera Shazav Mitam b'masa. Who's the opinion that says that the seminal emission of a zav becomes tamei if you carry it? Ilay mahai tana. Maybe it's this opinion. The Tanya we learned, Rabbi Yezer, Shechva Zera Shazav Eina Mitama b'masa. The seminal emission of a zav does not become tamei with masa. However, Rabbi Shua says, Mitame b'masa, it does become tamei b'masa. Ziva. So, like we said, the emission of zav and shechva zera semen is very similar, and therefore Rabbi Shua says even if it's clearly a seminal emission, however, presumably it has a small amount of ziva in it. Now, take just a small tangent. This is actually a practical question in halacha today, which is today we don't know what tumah ziva is, but there is a question. Maybe every person does have a tumah ziva. Maybe it comes along with a seminal emission. We just don't recognize it, and therefore every person is sort of a suffix tumah zav. Okay, what difference would this make? Whether ever it's a suffix tumah zav or not. Yeah. It's a longer discussion, but it does have components that would pertain to going onto the Temple Mount. A zav is not allowed to go on the Temple Mount. Now, the question is whether it's advisable to go on the Temple Mount in the first place, and the bulk of rabbinic leadership says you shouldn't. But the question is why and what the halachic discussion is, and this is part of the halachic discussion. This opinion of Rabbi Shua that says maybe every single shechva zera is every seminal emission also contains zav. Now, Rabbi Shua is only saying it once you're already a zav. The question is today that we don't even know what a zav looks like. Maybe it's everywhere. We just don't know. We just don't see it. Okay, so Rabbi Shua says that actually shechva zera, seminal emission, is tamei b'masa. Why? Because it's also a zav emission. If it's a zav emission, so then every zav emission also has tumas masa. The Gemara says, hold on a second. Afilu Rabbi Shua, lo yamar el mishum tzich ziva, aval be'eni loy. Rabbi Shua is not saying that the seminal emission of a zav is tamei b'masa. What Rabbi Shua is actually saying is the seminal emission of a zav has zav in it, and that's why it's tamei b'masa. Because it's a zav emission, not because it's a seminal emission. That seems to contradict our Mishnah. that says that a seminal emission is tamei b'masa. Mas means if you carry it.
Oh.
Okay. El Omer Rabbi Barava says Loimer she'ein toilim bo. One second. Okay, the explanation is as follows: that what the Mishnah is saying is that the shechva, typically speaking, because Zov and shechva zera and seminal emission look similar, so therefore, if a person has a known seminal emission, so then for the next 24 hours, we'll talk more about that. Maybe it's not 24 hours, maybe it's that night, or that the end of that day cycle. So it's typically a seminal emission will occur at nighttime, so it'd be until the next evening. Right, so it'd be night, a day, morning, afternoon. At sundown, he could become a Zav again. Now, so typically you have that either 24-hour or that day period where we ignore Tumat Zav when we have a known seminal emission. However, once you're already a Zav, you don't have that exception. A Zav who sees a Zav-like emission, even though he has a known seminal emission within the same day, is still tamei. He doesn't get that window to ignore the Tumas Zav, which he usually gets. So Rav Papa said to Rava, L'meimar, presumably, Adi Cholshahu the Chazi. Presumably, this is related to the fact that the one second. Yeah, because of the weakness associated with his seminal emission, so we consider him sort of to be in one of the categories of the mission. It's like he's ill, meaning, and that's why we said if somebody's ill, that could cause a potential of seeing Tumas Zav, a Zav-like emission. So therefore, if he has a known seminal emission that day, so therefore we consider him as if he's a weak person, and that's the cause of his Tumas Zav. Together? Okay. So the Gemara says no, that can't be. It can't be that the reason the fact that we typically ignore Zav within 24 hours of a shechva zera, of a seminal emission, is not because he's weak. How do I know this? But tonight we learned. One second. So Rava responded, but tonight we learned as follows: Gershon is gayer, metame miyad beziva. A person who converted becomes immediately tamei with Tumas Zav. Now hold on a second. One second. Yeah, so we're talking about a scenario where somebody converted, but the day before he converted, or that the day of his conversion, he had a known seminal emission. But he has there's no other sort of excuse. There's no other reason that he has. And he sees a re'iyah, he sees an emission of Zav. He becomes tamei immediately. And the Gemara asks, why? Why don't we say that the fact that he had a seminal emission the day before should discount the Tumas Zav? In other words, we're saying that a seminal emission the same day of Zav is a logical excuse, as opposed to sort of a biblical excuse. In other words, as opposed to a law-based excuse. We're saying it's a physical factor because he's weaker. But hold on, if somebody converted, he should also have the excuse, but yet he doesn't. Obviously, the excuse, the relationship between a seminal emission and the Zav emission on the same day is not because of a logical excuse. In other words, a logical association between a sort of physiological association between the two types of emissions, but it's the law. That's the law. And once before you convert, you don't have the law in place. So you converted, now we discount the fact that you had a seminal emission the same day because it's not a physical factor, physiological factor. That's the law. So Gemara says El Tanoi. It's a machlokes Tanam. In Tanya we learn Shechva zera shazov mitame b'masa kol me'es leis. The seminal emission of a zav is tamei for the 24-hour period. Rabbi Yossi Yomer, Yomi. Rabbi Yossi says it's that day. Wait a second. Okay. Okay. So in other words, the explanation of the Mishnah is as follows. The law is that there is a law that if you have a tumas carry, seminal emission within 24 hours. Okay, so tumas zov is not fixed by just going to the mikvah. Tumas carry could be. Tumas carry, go to the mikvah and you fix it. But tumas zov is a much longer process if you're already a zov. Okay, so if you're already if you're not yet a Zav and you have a Zav emission on this in the same day as a seminal emission, the law says you're not a Zav. But if you're Tameh and you have them in the same day, you have to restart your counting period, 3 and 7 days, whatever it is. Okay. And therefore, that's the explanation of our Mishnah. Now, how long is that period? Is machlokes, is that period 24 hours or is it that day? This law that if you have a seminal emission and a Zav emission on the same day, the Zav emission is discounted, it's not included. This connection is either 24 hours or that day. John, the going to the mikveh does make you a new person, but Tumah Zav is a more significant Tumah. It's the same thing. There are a few other types of Tumah Yetzim Gufsa in the same category that require time as well as going to the mikvah. So that would be, let's say, Nida and Yeledis would be in the same category as well, and Mitzayra, which is not exactly Tumah Yetzim Guf, but it's typically in the same. They typically follow similar rules to other cases of Tumah Yetzim Guf.
Yeah, but he's not even in the category of a person that's susceptible to that tuma. So I don't understand how just by the fact that his conversion becomes effective automatically means it's a problem.
No, so we're talking here where the man converted and then he had a Zav emission.
Afterwards.
Now,
Okay.
Typically, if he was Jewish within that 20, if it was Jewish, in other words, if he was Jewish always, or he converted 5 days earlier, so then he had a seminal emission plus a Zav emission within the same day, that then he would ignore the Zav emission because it happened within the same time frame as a seminal emission, so it could be ignored. However, because he converted after his seminal emission, but before his Zav emission, and then he experiences a Zav emission, and he doesn't have another one of the 7 excuses we learned about in the Mishnah, then he becomes Tamei Zav because he had a Zav emission, and the fact that he had a seminal emission the same day is not included. It doesn't work to discount the Zav emission. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I thought the assumption you were going on was that he had the emission before the conversion.
Got it. Okay. Okay, well, I'm glad we clarified that. Okay, so Micah Mifagi, what's this debate, whether it's an evening or it's a day or it's a 24-hour cycle. 24-hour cycle is typically called me'es la'es, from time to time, meaning 6 to 6 or 5 to 5, etc. This is Shmuel, in the question of Shmuel. The Shmuel Rami, Shmuel had the following question. Ksiv, we learn, if we have a person who had an event at night, this is a seminal mission. Ksiv lifnes erev yorchetz b'mayim. Before sundown, he goes to the mikveh. Manda Amar. Okay, so we have two things here. 1 second. Manda Amar me'es la'es, daik me lifnes erev. Hold on a moment. Okay, the one who says that the period is a 24-hour period, he focuses on the words of lifnes erev, meaning after the sun sets, he goes to the mikveh. That means presumably it's a 24-hour cycle. In other words, presumably he experienced the seminal mission at night, and therefore he waits till nightfall. After nightfall, he goes to the mikveh because that's when it happened 24 hours earlier. The idach dayak mikri loyla. The other one focuses on the fact that it happened at night, meaning it's a night plus a day, which is the Jewish cycle of the day, right? Night first, then day. So therefore, mikri loyla means the tumah is for the night and then the following day. and Uman the Amr Milifnes Erev Haksiv Mikri Laila. What the one who says that he goes to the mikveh at nighttime? Why does it say Mikri Laila? Why does it say that the seminal emission occurs at nighttime? In other words, it seems to imply that the period is a period of a day. It's nine in a day. Some verses no. Typically, a seminal emission occurs at night, and therefore it means that he got the tuma at night usually, because that's what usually happens. And then, but he becomes tar 24 hours later the next night. Okay. Next Mishnah on Samach Vav Ben Aleph. Nozir hayishmuel kediver Reb Nahiroi. Reb Nahiroi said that Shmuel, the prophet, became a Nozir. Shnemar, as the pasuk says, when Chana is praying for Shmuel, she says, "Umoira loyala al roshai." A moira will not go on his head. What is moira? Moira means a few things. The typical word for moira means fear. In other words, she's giving a prayer to Hashem that he should not be fearful of any other men. But Rabbi Nahiroi says, never b'Shimshon, when we talk about Shimshon, who was clearly a Nazir, the pasuk says he was a Nazir, Nizir elikim hanar, he will be a Nazir. But Shimshon, what does it say? Umayra. It says Mayra referring to a razor. Umayra layala roshi. But never b'Shmuel Umayra. And by Shmuel it also says Mayra. 1 second. Ma Mayra ha'amur b'Shimshon Nazir, Ach Mayra ha'amur b'Shmuel Nazir. The word Mayra is talking about a razor, and it indicates that they were both Nazirim. Rav Yossi says, "V'aloi ein Mayra el shavasar v'dam." Mayra here doesn't mean a razor; it means fear. In other words, she's asking for a son who will be bold enough to be able to discount what other, the fear that he would naturally have of other men. Amar le Rav Nahiroi says, no, can't be. Why? Because we know that Chana's tefillah, her prayer, was successful, and yet we also find that Shmuel was afraid. But like Farnamer, the pasuk says, "Vayomer Shmuel." Shmuel says, "Eich elech v'shama Shaul v'haragani." How will I go ahead and tell Shaul that the kingdom has been taken from him? Shaul will kill me. Evidently, he was afraid. So clearly, if fear here means fear for men, then the prayer wasn't successful, because he clearly was afraid of men. He clearly was afraid of other men. Says the Gemara. This Gemara is another statement, effectively, of Rav Nahiroi, and with that, we'll conclude the Masechta. Amrle Rav L'chia Brei. Rav says to Chi his son, Chatoif ubrech. If you have an opportunity, try to be the one to lead the benching. V'chein Amrle Rav Huna l'Rav Brei. Rav Huna says to Rav his son, Chatoif ubrech. Grab it, go ahead and grab it, and try to be the one to lead in the prayers, lead in the benching. Gemara says, Lamemra, do you mean to say the mevarich adif, the one who makes the blessing, who leads the benching, the one who gives the zimun, is better. V'atani we learned. Rabbi Yossi says, Gadol ha'ayna amen yoser min ha'mevarich. The one who responds amen is greater than the one who makes the blessing. So in other words, rather be in the audience responding amen than to be in the lead and make the bracha. The Amrle Rav Nahiroi, same person again. That's why the Gemara is brought here. Rav Nahiroi says, "Hashemayim kachu." I swear that this is the case. Teda, how do I know this? So this is if anyone's reading the news, what's going on in Bakhmut, this is exactly what's happening. Who does the dirty battles? The convicts, right? The conscripts. The professional soldiers stand in the back. So the cheap soldiers go in front, they get killed, and then the professional soldiers come in and they wipe out. They're successful in the attack.
That's always done.
That's how it's always done, apparently. So Glurian, these are the weaker soldiers. Them is Skarim and Muhammad. They fight. So in other words, sort of the leader of the benching, he's the one who introduces the benching. So he's the weaker guy. And the professional soldiers stand in the back and they say amen and they win the battle. That's all it takes. Just tell them that this is the secret of how to win a war. Just say amen and run in. Okay. Anyway. Okay. So the Gemara says Tanaihi, it's a debate. The Tanya we learn. We have here a brayso that says that both the one who makes the blessing and the one who answers the amen are extremely noteworthy. They're both honorable. However, the one who leads the benching, he gets the answer to his blessings first. So clearly it's a debate. Some say the one who leads the benching is the best, is the higher level, and some say it's the one who responds the main, that's the higher level. Okay, now we finish with the Gemara. This is the end of the Gemara. I believe you saw this, I think it was in Yevamis as well, and quite a few Masechtas end this way, and brachas, both in Bavli and in Yerushalmi. Amar Belazar, Amar B'Chanina. Belazar says the name of Rabbi Chanina, Talmid Chachamim Marbim Shalom Ba'olam, that Torah scholars bring peace in the world. Shenemar B'chol B'nayach Limudi Hashem V'rav Shalom B'nayach. And as the Gemara in other Masechtas explains, B'nayach here is a reference to Torah scholars because they build the world. And they are the Rav Shalom. They're the ones who bring an abundance of peace. Hadron Alach Hakusim Einlam Nizir Slikla Masechtas Nazir. Mazel tov. That concludes the Masechta.
So, yeah, that's right.
Yes.
Where? Compare whether it means building or learning or what? Yeah. Deny it.
Yeah. So that it's part of, yeah, sure. We say it every day.
Every
Yeah.
day.
Part of the davening every day. Okay, so God willing, tomorrow I'll begin Masechta Saita. I didn't have time for an introduction, but I don't think in Saita it's not necessary. I guess I give a sales pitch for Saita. It's a short Masechta. It's 48 pages long. You'll finish it before Shavuos, and it covers quite a lot of ground, all throughout all sorts of different discussions. Many of them Saita related, many of them not Saita related. Also discusses Saita, but it's a lot of Agada Gemara as well.
Pictures, lots of pictures.
And it's an easy Masechta and very enjoyable. Okay, great day and Mazel tov.
Enjoyable sounds good.
Yeah.